Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have Yolanda Stevenson from Taxi Mom. Yolanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, it is so nice to have you, a fellow child-related business franchisor. We have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
So Yolanda, I'm sure the audience is probably thinking, okay, Taxi Mom, I have an idea what this business is, but I really want to hear what inspired you to kick things off.
Well, I honestly, it came from the need. I needed the service. I used to work in the corporate world and I traveled a lot. And so when my son was in the 7th grade, he had to cross a major intersection every day. So we bought him his first phone and a bike, and he had to cross over a Beltline. And it's here in Dallas, and it's a very busy intersection. And, it's not that I was worried about him. I was worried about the other people because, kids get hit off of bikes all the time. And I kept thinking, gosh, I know I can't be the only person looking for a service like this. So I did my due diligence and really started to look into it. And couldn't really find anybody. So I decided, I came home with the idea and told my kids, and they helped me pick out the name. We had picked up yard signs, those big real estate signs, and we planted them in the 4 different areas that I knew that I could service because I was interested in picking up my kids, obviously, in addition to everyone else's kids. And it just took off like fire because the second year I had my husband quit his job and I had my sister move in from Waco, and we had 3 vehicles running the second year.
Wow. And you started this company in 2004, correct?
Yes, I did.
But you didn't start franchising until 2019.
That's correct.
So you've been at it for quite a while. So the obvious question that people are going to have is there an issue with the schools and school buses? Like, why is your service needed?
Well, when you live within a 2-mile radius, you get no bus transportation. And then when you live in an open district, they don't service everybody. And then, of course, there's a big bus driver shortage right now. Everybody's talking about the bus driver shortage. And then when you go to charter schools and private schools, there is no bus transportation. So transportation is a really big issue for a lot of families. But then we've also had students that have been bullied on the bus. And parents pull them off the bus because they've been bullied so badly. And I can't even imagine these days, with the cyberbullying and what have you. So there's all different types of reasons why parents don't want their kids on a school bus.
Sure. There's so many reasons why I could imagine why people don't even have the access, like you were saying earlier. If you live in a school district or live near a school like I do, you see the long car line anyway. So there's a couple of schools near me where I know strategically when not to leave the house or when not to go out to the store. I'm like, oh gosh, I know on Mondays they get out early and I have no business wanting to be driving on the road because the car line just, it takes over. So those are all your potential customers, are they not?
Yes, they are. In fact, we do get a lot of those calls when they see the van coming by. Just because we get a lot of parents that are under stress because they're on the verge of losing their job from taking that they think it might be a 30-minute wait time to pick up their kids when it may end up taking over an hour, because they use their lunch times to go during that 3:00 hour. But the lines are so long that they call us and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. But then you have the parents that work an hour away or even 30 minutes away that they're not going to have a chance to do it. And you also have your parents that are still working from home that cannot, take that time off to go and handle picking up their kids. So we've got a lot of parents that do call us. We transport over 600 kids company-wide right now.
Hmm.
And it's like a bus route. So when we go in through the daycare line. We make an exception for, well, only for our elementary school kids. The schools are very familiar with who we are, and when we go into a new territory, we call the school, we introduce ourselves, we let them know the type of service that we are, and they give us access into the daycare bus line.
So with that said, tell me what makes your service different.
Well, we're a subscription based service. We're not an on demand service. We also have a mobile app, and a lot of parents think that they can download the mobile app and automatically get the service. But because we're not on demand, we like to build the relationship. And basically, what they have to do is they have to register online. We call them. We send them a quote. We let them know who we are, where we come from, to give them that feeling of trusting us. Because I know me, I would never want to put my kid in a car that I don't know that particular driver. And all of our drivers are the same driver over and over for each route. So that driver never changes out. And that makes that parent feel very, very comfortable with knowing that.
You know what? The other thing that really impresses me about you is that you've been at this you were at it for 15 years before you franchised. So you really have your whole concept down pat, which is not, not typical. A lot of franchisors, they have their company running like a year or two and like, all right, I'm ready to franchise my concept. But you've done this for quite a while. So what was it about franchising that made you decide, you know what, this is the way we're going to expand?
From the very beginning, I always knew I wanted to franchise, to be honest with you. I knew that we had to do proof of concept. We get so many calls. We have a wait list of over 1,000 people, and this is nationwide, that are waiting for us to come into their area. They call us from everywhere asking us, do you service this area? And we have to ask them, if we've never heard of the city, well, what state are you in? So we knew that franchising it would be a really good, I don't want to have the liability of owning a ton of vehicles and running them. I just didn't want to do that because, it's ridiculous. Why not share?
Sure. Absolutely.
I'm not looking to go out into a big territory and put myself everywhere and try to monopolize the market, because I really believe that there's a lot of opportunity, and if you just hit 1% of a school registration, most schools have at least 300 to 500 students, you're going to be doing just fine. And we don't even hit 1%. We probably hit 0.1%.
Yeah, you're barely scratching the surface. So tell me about the vehicle and like the capacity of one truck or of one bus.
So what we use 12 and 15 passenger vans.
Okay.
And on the 12 and 15 passenger vans, we can actually transport up to 30 students. We try to keep it down at 25 students per route, so that we don't put so much stress on the driver. And the drivers work part-time. They work from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and then they turn around and get back out on the road at 2:30 to 5 o'clock. And we try not to have anybody out on the road after 5 p.m. because most of them are either moms or dads that both work as drivers. And we try to make sure that they get that family time that they want to get, with their family. And then we also have the ability, like if they want to transport their own children, we try to align them with the school that their kid goes to. And that's an actual benefit for them. We don't charge them, to take their own kids to school as long as they're working for us.
And what about your franchisee then? Is your ideal franchisee running the business?
Yes, it's owner operator.
So your franchisees are typically the driver as well then?
Sometimes they are.
Okay.
It just depends on the circumstances. Owner operator for us is that they have to be in the business. They don't have to necessarily drive, because most of them do still have a job and they go out and they hire people. We always recommend that once they get to 4 to 5 routes, that's when they need to go out and hire an area manager or a route manager. But for them to typically get in the car, most of them that are hands-on, they usually do the driving themselves. I don't drive anymore, but I drove all the way up to 2 years ago, and I still do backup for mine.
Okay. And you're in Texas, right? So you have franchisees in Texas and Florida right now, right? You have
Yes.
13 units.
Yes.
Have you thought about sort of how your vision for this company? Like how big is big? How many locations do you see? Do you plan on growing?
I have definitely want to go nationwide. I know that we can really, if we really are scratching the surface between Texas, Florida, Illinois, and California, we could do at least 1,600 units,
Mm,
territories. I want to get to royalty sufficiency, of course,
of
and I
course.
figured that it's going to be about 125.
Hmm.
So I have a ways to go. I hear all the stories about how hard it is to get to 75. Right now, we have 7 applications that we're going through that are pending, for here. And then I think we had one in California. I think, like for me, it's really important for me to understand what I'm getting into.
Hmm.
And, franchise support is super important to me because I do recognize that it's very important to make sure that your franchisees are going to be supported. And, like we have a Taxi Mom University every other week. And I was ready to kind of like take back and say, let's do this once a month, guys, just because I know what's on my plate. And everybody was like, no, we love this.
Don't
Oh my
take it
gosh.
away.
Yeah. So I was like, and and I started doing that a little bit over a year ago.
Hmm.
And, you can't give people the keys and then expect them to automatically know and,
Right.
and expect them to be successful because it's not easy building a territory. Yes, the demand is there,
Hmm.
but I've been in Richardson for almost 20 years and some people are really surprised and they're like, I didn't even know you existed.
Sure. What do you envision for a franchise owner? How many vans would they have that would suffice for a territory, and how big is a territory?
So we did a lot of thinking about this because obviously I have made mistakes and sold
Haven't we
too
all,
much.
Yolanda? Haven't
Oh
we
yeah,
all?
for sure. We know that the vans territory, you can do up to 12 vans.
Up to
You can
12
do
vans.
more than that, but you can do up to 12. It just really kind of depends on what that franchisee is looking for. And I'm real particular and I ask those questions because obviously we definitely want to have some that have at least 12 in their fleet because we know what the number can produce. But, I think it's going to be based on what do they want as far as for their family going forward. Because Taxi Mom for me, I raised my family on Taxi Mom.
Hmm.
I'm one of those that you get so connected in an identity way with your business that it's hard to figure out what your exit plan is going to be.
Sure.
And I've heard some of your podcasts where you talk about that.
Hmm.
And so it's really given me a lot to think about when it comes to Taxi Mom and then Taxi Mom franchise. And then we have Taxi Mom families. So, I definitely think about the future and what I want to see in a franchise owner. That's super important. But most of our franchise owners are women. Most of them come from corporate. And most of them are looking for a service like Taxi Mom. So why not buy one? Because I thought when we first launched the franchise, I was thinking how hard it was going to be to get out there and really, go after it. So when we launched in September, that night that I went live on Facebook, the very next day I had an application. And it was somebody that had been watching and
Okay.
she had been waiting and she was chomping at the bit. So she's my very first franchise owner.
And where's she? Where's her
She's in
location?
Forney. She's in
Okay.
Forney. Hmm.
Okay. And of your franchise locations, the majority of them are in Texas,
Yes.
right? And then Florida's the
Yes.
other one. Yep.
Hmm.
You mentioned Taxi Mom families. That
Yes.
I want to talk about the foundation that you've created because it's such a noble cause.
When I first started, I always got calls about, do you take CCMS? And CCMS is like a state funded, I think it's through TWC. But what they do is they give families money, and it's not like scholarship. You have to apply to get it. I never could qualify to become a part of that group. And I never could find out why. And it was because I'm not a daycare.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to get in the daycare business just to get it to help these families. But I do get calls all the time on, do you take CCMS? And, I'm like, well, no, I don't. And I have tried to figure out how to get in there, but I can't get in there without being a daycare. So we decided to start a fund ourselves because we get so many families that need the help. And we do price reduction. We work with all of our families. My husband died in 2011.
Sorry.
That was part of the reason why it took me a while to franchise, because it was a sudden death. He had a heart attack. My daughter and I have always talked about a foundation in memory of him because he was one of the drivers and he helped build the business.
Aw.
So we had decided to start our own, and we started our own 501c3, came in. We knew that, people were going to be suffering from the pandemic, as far as being able to put things in place for their kids. And so I came in and I said, it's time. It's time for us to create something. And I wanted it to be transparent because I didn't want all the families to think that, oh, well, we're going to be making a lot of money, like our franchisees thinking
Right.
we're going to be making a lot of money from this fund. But no, everybody's limited because we're brand new. So we're raising funds all the time to help fund some of these families. In fact, one of the families that we are funding, it was listed in the Wall Street Journal. She came out and talked about Taxi Mom just recently, and she even gave a picture of herself and her family and talked about, how we helped her family. And that's super important to me just because I was a mom that needed help. When you're an entrepreneur and everything weighs on you, you make too much to get the help, but you don't make enough to get the help. And you're
Which
right there in the middle. So that's why we created it. We also help fund families that don't even use Taxi Mom. They can use a competitor. We have a lot of mom and pops that are competitors. And as long as they're LLC and they meet the requirements and they carry commercial insurance, we will help fund those families as well.
that really is something else. I think that your mission, you realize, is much bigger than just Taxi Mom.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me go back to your franchisees now. How do you help them with getting customers?
Well, everybody's always calling corporate, that's for sure. But we wrap our vans. So wrapping the vans is huge because it's a lot of word of mouth. But I do go to like Chamber of Commerce. If they ask me to come out to help them do an event, I will get out there and go help them. They've asked me to come out and do observation drives. And I've gone out there with them and just being out in the field with them because that's super important for them to know that you're with them every step of the way. So there's so many things that we do. Like I said, we had our Taxi Mom University and I asked for their input. I want to know what's going to help them to be successful. Like we have the technology that it's a SaaS-based company. So we have the portal to support us. And everybody registers, everybody goes through the flow of how the business is supposed to go through. But we also do like training, lots of training. But when they ask us, hey, can we do this with our portal? Can we add this to our mobile app? I take everything in and I'm always doing all that technology piece for them so that we can make sure that, they have the things that they need to be supported.
Sure. We want to streamline the business as much as possible using the
Oh,
technology, right? So they can focus on growing the business.
And, ours is made from scratch. So I knew, with the 15 years that I had before franchising, I knew exactly how I wanted my business to work for me. So I just wanted to make sure that I duplicated that. And so we digitized everything. Everything's digitized.
Let's elaborate a little bit more on the training. As a new franchisee, what can I expect?
Well, they get about 10 weeks of training. They have to come into the office. And it's a lot of portal training, teaching them how to use the portal from the registration process all the way to when they receive their payments and how everything is connected. We go over W-2s, 1099s, IRS, because a lot of them come in and they don't know what a business is, like they didn't know that they have to pay taxes on, Texas Workforce Commission, that additional tax in with IRS. So we come in and we teach them all of the ins and outs of the business to make them successful, even what to look for in a customer, what that customer avatar looks like.
Mm.
And they take a lot of notes, but even if you get the 10 weeks of training, you're still not going to know, just because there's so much that's in the technology itself on the portal. But we even have cash flow in our portal. And then we just linked up with Architect. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but it's a tech stack. And our developer had to write a bunch of different APIs because of the complexities of our portal, because we have it all the way down to a route. So, and we even have route expenses on there for when the driver can take a picture of what they just spent on the gas, they upload it, and we can see it for each route.
You created the software from the beginning. You didn't obviously take it off, buy something off the shelf, because you started back in '04. Like when I started back in '03, we built our own proprietary software. My bet is, though, if you had started the business today, like if I started it today as well, probably would have done some sort of mix mosh of stuff off the shelf, because it's just too expensive to build it from scratch today.
Oh, yeah. I know. I asked my guys here, I said, so how much do you think this would have costed me today?
Oh,
And they said, oh, easy. That's $600,000.
for sure. That's a big difference maker, though, between you and another service, because teaching your franchisees how to pick up children is one thing, but you're really teaching them the business of Taxi Mom. And if your franchisees are anything like they were mine, a lot of them, this is their first go around in owning a business. Like you were saying, you're teaching them IRS rules and what's a 1099 and what's a W-2. A lot of us, when we start out in franchising, we don't realize on how much we need to go all the way back to step one. Like, here's what the business is. Here's what it's not. Here are some of the regulatory things. We think, oh, I need to just teach them how to pick up kids, how to do routes, how to run a sports league. That's that's the advanced part of the business.
Yes. And, that's super important. I think an IFA at the emerging, everybody in franchising is super, super like knowledgeable. And the first thing that they say is, it's all about the franchisee. And I think anybody that's getting ready to franchise, they need to understand that it is all about the franchisee, and it is all about that support. And it's not about you anymore. It's about your brand, and it's all about the brand. So there was a lot of leniency that I gave, like, oh, we can get our shirts anywhere and have them monogrammed, But now that it's expanded and gotten more, as we get more and more franchisees, that process is really starting to stick with me on the brand, because it's not about Yolanda anymore. It's not about Taxi Mom anymore. It's about the brand in itself.
Yeah, you learned a valuable lesson that we all go through is when we first start out, we act like, well, I can do this just for now. But for anybody that's thinking about franchising their concept, that's listening to this, my hope for them is that when they go into franchising, they treat everything they're going to do as if they already have 100 franchise units. Like, can you sustain this? Is this the way the business should look? Because when you agree, it's really tough to go back to franchisees and say, yeah, I know we used to allow this, but we don't do it anymore. We've all been there. I've been there. And there's some difficult conversations that we can avoid if we set it up from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that because, culture, you want to change your culture. That's really hard to do. Like, whenever I first started, I didn't have a mobile app. So when we built the mobile app and launched it, all the families that were riding with me before would never go to the mobile app. And, it took me a couple of years to really push that mobile app on them. Go there to make a schedule change because it streamlines to the driver automatically. The kid will fall off. When you look at it from the perspective of you as the owner to the customer, and then it becomes you to the franchisee, culture's super important. And that's the one thing that I want to make sure that my franchisees are on point when it comes to how to treat your customer. The customer's always right. Even
Right.
if they're wrong, they're always right. And the one thing I always coach and teach our franchisees and even our employees is you always have to remember this has nothing to do with you. It's
Yes.
something in their lives that's triggering that type of behavior.
Right.
But you have to remember to separate yourself because it has nothing to do with you.
Both of our businesses, obviously, we're in the mom and dad business, which in itself, the big challenge is that they're looking out for their child, of course. We're looking out for their child. And they need to remember, as we also need to keep in mind, that we all have the same best interest, but we can also be a source of stress for them. Whether it's a sports program, they don't feel like their kid's getting the right attention, or whether you're picking up their child from school and there's a delay or there's something going on, they're going to be nervous.
Yeah, and empathy is super important in this
Yes.
business. And one thing that we've learned is you wine and dine your franchisee, your prospect.
Mhm.
You want to see what they're doing and how they react to situations, from taking them to a restaurant, because you never know. These days, servers are going to be really slow because everywhere, everybody is suffering from the employment shortage.
Right.
Just to see the reactions, to see how they respond, because they can tell you all day long what they think you want to hear, but to see them in action is super important. For me, you do have to have that empathy, because empathy for anybody, including a parent, a child. My sister had an issue this past week, and it broke my heart. I mean, she cried. So she said that, she would get the heebie-jeebies because the dad was all tatted up and he came outside and
Mhm.
he just gave her, like the weirdest feeling. And she said she was not comfortable. And that day he didn't come out, but the son came out. And she says he's like a linebacker. He's in the eighth grade. He's over 200 pounds. He plays football. He came in and she goes, "What's going on? I thought you had a game today." And he goes, "I do." And then he busted out crying.
Oh,
And
no.
he cried because he said that his dad got in trouble again, got picked up, was stealing a car from a neighbor on the other side of the street. And he was so upset. And she said, this big guy is crying like a baby. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that." She goes, "But you know what you need to remember from this? You need to remember, and this is a lesson for you, that you never want to be that person.
Mhm.
You never want to be like him, and you won't be like him." And when you're dealing with kids on a daily basis, these type of things do happen. Because that brought back so many memories for me when I very first started, that a kid ran away from home and came to my house because she felt that safe.
Oh, wow. So you really, in franchisee selection and trying to somehow measure empathy, how do you do that? How do you know that they're a right fit?
There's so many factors. I mean, you ask the questions. We talk about different things. We look at the reaction for stories that we might have of a kid, or how would you handle this?
Hmm.
You get so many different types of families that you're dealing with, from the lower demographic to the higher demographic.
Hmm.
And you need to know how to deal with these people.
Sure.
You have to be a people person. You have to love kids. And if you don't love kids, you're not in the right space. And that's the one thing, is the biggest question we ask is, do you love kids? I mean, because kids are kids. You're going to have your rambunctious ones. I had one that would refuse to stay in his seat. And I had to end up terminating services because it put us in a big liability position to, if this kid can't sit, from A to B, and he's not listening to the driver, and the drivers don't have an aid,
Right.
it puts us in a bad situation. So they have to be able to come in, be able to give us like ideas of how they would treat a situation like that. Like, how would you act if a driver disrespected a parent? And how would you react to something like that? If a parent calls and They turned on a whole different side of themselves and came at you. How would you respond to something like that?
Being a private service is you can tell somebody, no, this is not a good fit. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's go back though to the employee shortage. So how have you been able to, first of all, how did you get through COVID? Number one. And secondly, how are you dealing with employee shortage? If there's school bus driver shortages, how are you able to overcome it?
Well, on the school bus shortage, you have to have a CDL. With us, you don't have to have a CDL. My sister was a school bus driver,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that they put those school bus drivers through in testing, they have to know everything about what's under that hood. And it can be intimidating, especially for a woman, to go under a hood and look at the different things. I mean, I obviously know just because of experience of driving vans. I can figure out if it's a starter, if it's a transmission, different things like that.
Yolanda, first of all, hold on. Women aside, the only thing I would be able to do is put the windshield wiper fluid in the van. That is it. So let's not say this is a woman thing, first of all, okay?
No, it's not. It's not. But there are a lot of women that do drive school buses, and that's the one thing that they do come out and they tell us is that that's what's intimidating. A lot of they're usually retired people that will come and apply, and then they send referrals over to us.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, we do. I'm gonna be totally transparent. I mean, it's not
Sure.
easy keeping them, but it's all about the culture. And
Yeah.
you build that culture good enough for them to see a driver. For us, they have the benefit of buying a franchise after 3 years for 50% off.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
very impressive.
So, when they see it and they're like, wow, I want to do this. And I've had one employee,
Mm-hmm.
she was actually a customer. And from a customer, she called me and said that she was going to go to school. She was tired of being in corporate and she was going to go ahead and go to school. So I said, well, if you're looking for a part-time job,
Mm-hmm.
come work for me. You can pick up your daughter. So she took me up on that. And then she went from a driver into coming into the office while I was building the franchise out. And she started getting really curious about it. And then she's like, do you think that I could ever buy a franchise? And I was like, yes, of course you could. She goes, really? And I said, yes, absolutely. And she ended up buying her first franchise, and she's one of our younger franchise owners. And she loves it. Absolutely, just love Perla. She's
Mm-hmm.
helped me. I don't think I've even told you this part yet. It's gonna blow you away. Our system, it translates into Spanish and in Mandarin on both sides, on the mobile app side for the consumer and also on the B2B side for a potential franchise owner that is speaking fluent Spanish and they only want to do their business in Spanish.
Wow.
They can now do that. And Perla helped with the translations of our policies and all the different things that we had to do in order to convert that over.
I'm impressed. That was actually one of the things we wanted to do at I9 Sports years ago. Never got to it. And then we saw how expensive it was going to be. And we're like, oh, we'll tackle that down the road. I'm super impressed that you took advantage of that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Very cool. I meant to ask you earlier, what's the investment range of a taxi mom?
All in, it's anywhere from 85,000 to 117,000. All in. They only have to start with one vehicle.
Okay.
We don't force them into starting with more than one. From our experience, what we have seen is that they start with the one in the first semester. Second semester, they're already getting ready to add the second one on.
So if I want to start adding on vans and I say, Yolanda, this is great. I've got the one, I've got the route coverage. I'm ready for a second one. How long does it take for me to get that second one?
Usually 6 months.
Okay. So I really got to plan this thing out.
I have one franchise owner that has 8.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But she owns 2 territories.
She owns 2 territories. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that makes sense. What's been your biggest surprise in franchising since you've been doing this for 4 years now?
How nice the franchise people are. Being in the industry of franchising and how open and honest. When you've been doing this for a long time, it's always just been you and you doing your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of one of those introverts, I like to sit
Me too.
behind. I like to sit behind the scenes,
Uh-huh.
But when franchising, I realized, and just recently in the last year and a half, since I've gotten involved with IFA, how it's turned around for me. Because if you're not involved in something,
Hmm.
in some type of networking, because that's all what it's all about, is networking and getting connected to the right people and,
Right.
what have you. I think that that's super important. And that's been really surprising for me, is just how nice and, how open they are with information, because you're not having to guard your information. It's not
You
proprietary
don't.
information.
Yeah, you don't have to go at it alone. I know I've mentioned this before in the past on the show that I don't get paid by the IFA. So this is not a commercial for the IFA, but I must say that it was an absolute game changer for me to be a member of
Yes.
the IFA from the very, very beginning. Just the access to people, and people that compete with one another are openly, share ideas, share what's working, what's not working. I recently came back from a franchise conference for emerging franchisors. I was blown away by the amount of tools and technology that is available now for franchisors that was not available 15, 20 years ago. It's, created by industry professionals. And then you have access to not only new technology and new tools, but also the additional services, whether it's using the broker networks or the franchise sales organizations that are playing at a much higher level now than they were 15 years ago. It is a different game today.
Yeah, I haven't gone brokers yet, but I keep hearing about brokers, and I'm still learning. I
Hmm.
learn every day. I'm actually taking a class right now through Cornell University. I'm doing a women's entrepreneurship certification, and I'm learning a lot from that. And I plan on doing my first capital raise, so I'm real excited about that. I'm going to go the Angel Network way.
I got to go back to the IFA though. You've recently received some very cool recognition from the IFA. Would you share with the audience?
I was interviewed, gosh, I think it was in September for the Hispanic Heritage Month. I've been part of the Latino Franchise Symposium, and I met Erica Garza there, and we've become friends. And she really wanted to elevate me and lift me up. And so she said, I really ask you if you would be willing to do this for me. Will you do an interview for IFA? Because she's on the Hispanic Council. I think she's the chairwoman of the Hispanic Latino Franchise Council. And so I said, sure, I'll do it, And any kind of, recognition that you get, I'm very humbled. I'm very grateful to be able to do these type of things, for not only Taxi Mom, but for myself, because it helps with my confidence of
Mhm.
getting out, because I've been really nervous about the capital raise, but then I realized, it's not any different than putting yourself in front of a prospect, because
Right.
you're prospecting, you're checking them out, you're trying to see if they're the right fit for you, just like you would anything else. So, I mean, my frame of mind has changed. It's really nice to get a lot of recognition on that end. Especially right now, I'm kind of struggling with my culture. I don't speak Spanish,
Mhm.
like how can I get this recognition when I don't speak Spanish? I'm learning. I signed up for a class, and I'll be learning every week, and I'm determined. But my parents are super fluent in Spanish, but they never spoke to us in Spanish because it was not something that they were allowed to do when they were going to school.
Interesting.
So I grew up in a country bumpkin town where there was 24 people that graduated, and I was probably maybe number two Hispanic, at the school.
Wow.
So I'm learning how to speak Spanish so that I can know how to converse, because I know that there's a lot of opportunity, and I want to be able to
Mhm.
help other people that are interested in owning their own business. That's super important to me. I want to give people opportunity that never thought that they had the opportunity.
Yolanda, I love your passion. I love your energy. You have so much to be proud of, but so I need to ask you though, what do you think you're most proud of?
My kiddos, my grandkids, I love my grandbabies, and for me, what I do for family. I do
Hmm.
for my family. I've always supported them in anything that they choose to do. And I'm super proud of my daughter. She's 24 years old. She went to college. Taxi Mom paid for her college.
Yes.
And, she got her first state job. She got her big girl job, and she's working for the state in Texas. She's in the housing and development, and just super proud that she graduated college, because I didn't go to college. Everything I've learned is all we come from an entrepreneur family, and my dad's been an entrepreneur since I was 3 years old, and he's still in business. He does construction, and I've been proud to see him succeed.
So that's how you don't have the fear of entrepreneurship, because it's been in your blood since you were a little girl.
I think so. You can't be afraid. I tell my sister all the time, you got to feel the fear, but do it anyway.
Yes. Just got to do it scared. Sometimes we get afraid, but we're going to do it scared anyway.
Yes.
Doesn't stop us. I think that's great. You've been so transparent. What has been, you think, one of your biggest challenges, or maybe a mistake you made, and what you learned from it?
The choices that we make really, really can affect you in the end. Franchising isn't easy. I think one of my bigger mistakes was coming in blinded at the cost of what it was going to cost to actually do this thing.
I am so glad you said that.
I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's not easy.
It is not. The estimated number is way too low that we hear before we franchise our company, right? We hear 125,000, 250,000 is what we hear. It is much higher than that to do it right. Right. I mean,
to do it right.
I mean, I could open my doors for $125,000, but I can't stay open. Yeah,
exactly. And, I think that had I been better prepared, knowing what the cost was going to be, because when you bootstrap, it's super, super hard. It's very stressful. There's a lot of times that I'll cry just because it's the only way that I can get that emotion out. A lot of people say, oh my God, you're so strong. There's times where I don't want to be strong.
You're still a human being, but Yolanda, you are a fighter.
I am a fighter. I have to say that I've always had to be the provider. I've always had to be the provider because, when I talked him into quitting his job, it was just me and him and my sister doing this thing. When you say literally blood, sweat, tears, it's literal blood, sweat, tears. It feels like I'm starting all over again with the franchise piece, just because
you are.
I built this company, it's doing its thing in 19 years, but then you come in 15 years later and you build another company. And this is a whole different build that you have no idea what you're doing and how you're going to do it. And then you start hearing all these different things coming at you, all different suppliers, vendors, everybody's coming after you. And it's just like, wait a minute, let me step back.
Right.
Let me take a breath.
Right. Because you thought, okay, I was doing Taxi Mom, but Taxi Mom franchising is a completely other business.
Super different.
Super different. What advice would you give to people who are considering joining Taxi Mom as a franchisee?
Do your due diligence. Ask the questions. Ask the hard questions, because I think when it comes to buying a business, and it doesn't matter if it's my business or not, because no matter what, the way I see it, I'm so passionate about Taxi Mom. Taxi Mom sells itself. I think that they just have to know, what are they getting themselves into? Have a plan. Know what your goals are. I've never thought of my exit plan until recently, but I think that they need to be thinking about their exit plan as well. What do they want out of Taxi Mom? What do they want to gain out of that?
I wish you all the best with it. How can people find out about Taxi Mom if they're looking to franchise?
You can visit our website at taximomfranchise.com.
Okay, awesome. I always finish with the tip jar. You're probably familiar with it. So the franchise community is so generous, like you mentioned earlier. So if somebody's thinking about franchising their concept, aside from the fact it's going to cost them a whole lot more than they're being told initially, what other piece of advice would you give somebody starting out in franchising?
Know exactly, you're not going to always know exactly what you want, but know how much time it's going to take, because it's not just going to come raining down on you. That's not how it happens. It doesn't matter what concept you purchase. You have to work at it no matter what. And you have to be willing to work at it. And if you're not willing to work at it, walk away.
Yolanda, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. I wish you all the continued success. And hopefully our paths will cross again someday.
I'm sure it will.
All right. Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.